Honestly, it was like a great gig. But I almost got fired after like 3 or 4 weeks.
How come?
Because I wasn't running fast enough. I was like too cool for like sprinting. I was like, this is a laid back job, guys. Like, why are you sprinting like 50 feet to a car? And I think it was like, for me, it just felt awkward. But the culture at that time of the guys who were running it, talking about good leaders, they were also Pepperdine guys. They're twin brothers. They were so hardcore. Like everything they did, they just went all in on.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we're going to run this lot like really hard. Because if we can park 200 cars with 3 people, that just means we're sharing the tips with fewer people.
More tips for you guys, yeah.
And so there was like no slacking. And it would get hairy. I mean, you'd have like a line on PCH because we were just too thin or whatever. But they were just like, no, we're just going to grind through this. And so you had to literally sprint for every car. And it took me like 2 or 3 weeks to get over that and almost got fired.
Yeah.
And I finally was like, I'm not going to get fired from a valet job. I'm going to figure this out. So it was a fun lesson in humility of like, if you're going to do something, you might as well go all in on it.
Welcome to Reframe Fix, hosted by Jake Smith, brought to you by Workbench. Real conversations about leadership, the stories behind the scenes, and what it takes to go from stuck to scaling.
Joel Christensen, welcome to the Reframe Fix.
Thank you so much, Jake. Good to be here, man.
We always start with the same question. What is a leader? How do you define a leader?
Man, it's, I think first and foremost, it's somebody who sets an example, somebody who leads by example and creates a compelling vision to give people an opportunity to follow. And I don't really like those dynamics, the framing of like leading and following, but I think at the end of the day, like, a good leader inspires people. And so more than just setting an agenda or a vision, it's got to be inspirational and compelling.
Yeah. You said something interesting, somebody who sets an example.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in that example? What's the example that you're wanting them to set?
I can talk about the people in my life that have been amazing leaders. I think what I've always valued, and I think this is different for everybody, like, we're wired different. So, but some of the things that compelled me to want to follow, strong leaders, in one way, it can be summed up as like, this person just cares. Like their heart's in the right place. They're not doing this for some sort of selfish gain or on an ego trip to accomplish their goals and dreams alone. Like this is someone who's actually engaged in the process of leading the people that, with the people they're leading. So high engagement, awareness of what people are up to and what they need. And that comes in so many different forms, like how you show up and show that level of engagement. But for me, it's always just been things like, does this person know what I'm interested in? Do they know what my goals are? Are they checking in with me on the human level? Like how my family's doing, not just the projects I'm working on.
Right.
So that's probably one of the biggest examples is just like, where's your heart at and how engaged are you? Consistency and reliability. I think for me, I look for like a certain like reliable level of energy and optimism. If it's, you never know what I'm going to get today, that's pretty hard. That's not exactly the example I'm looking for.
Uncertainty.
Yeah. So I think you want to know where you stand. I think you want to know what you're walking into on any given day. Man, I don't know.
Yeah.
How about you? What are some?
Turning the.
I'm going to turn this on the podcast right here. What are some examples of leaders that you're like, this is a quality that I want to emulate?
Yeah. Well, I'll just go with what comes to my gut first, which is I would use the phrase, they've got my back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And so they're going to be a proponent. They're for me. They're going to be, hey, the reality is we're going to make a mistake. We're going to make mistakes.
Right.
And so even in that moment, do I still feel like, hey, they're for me? And implicit in that is, hey, they care for me. High level of trust. I always turn to, when we start talking about this, trust in particular, there's an author, Charles Feltman, whose book, The Thin Book of Trust, is helped me gain perspective on this. But talks about to start with care, which you mentioned, because I would agree, like a leader who cares, somebody who is sincere, somebody who's reliable, and somebody who's competent.
Yeah.
Other things I might add would be makes hard decisions.
Right. Doesn't back down.
Doesn't back down.
The idea of trust is huge for me. Like, I like the framework of you can kind of earn trust either through competency or charisma, if you will, or maybe like affection. There's different ways to think about that, but like warmth.
Yeah.
So warmth. Well, I like the word warmth. We'll go with warmth.
Yeah.
Warmth and competency are like two sides here that kind of create trust. And I think a good leader has to have both and use both sort of interchangeably. I think when you're the most competent person, you're by default going to have, going to earn a lot of trust. People are going to want to, be in the foxhole with somebody who's super competent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've always seen the most effective leaders really also bring that warmth to the table, and especially in the right time, the right place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always helped me think about like team dynamics. I'm like, okay, if I've got somebody who's off the charts on competency, but pretty low on warmth, I need to bring in somebody who can balance that person and with a lot of warmth. And that's helped me understand kind of like how to round out teams or even in my own world, like, okay, I led that meeting with way too high on warmth and not enough competency. I need to make up for that next time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and also as you're saying that, what's coming to mind is nobody ever wants to be described as cold.
Right. True. Yeah.
Like my CEO is really cold.
Right. For sure.
You're a CEO.
Yep.
Your company is Parkwell. Give our listeners, hey, the 30, 60-second elevator pitch on Parkwell.
Yeah, Parkwell, it's simple. We manage parking facilities, parking, and anything related to parking that you can think of. We provide that service. And it's this weird industry where it's sort of this underbelly. It's infrastructure, and people probably have no clue of the fact that it's either an industry or just how large it is.
Yeah.
But there's probably 50,000 or so paid parking facilities in the country that all have a third-party manager attached to them, and that's what we do. So we compete across the country, mainly in Colorado and in California today, but we are planting a flag in Salt Lake and eager to expand into the Southeast and other regions. So we're about 9 years old, 300 employees, top line revenue in the 70 million range, and it's been a fairly fast growing business, and totally self funded, no outside investors. And that's not true, actually. We have a very small outside investor who's a good friend of mine, and that's more of a recent thing. But so it's a great little boutique business, and there's a hospitality component to it, right? So part of what we do is we provide sort of arrival and departure services at hotels or big venues, and so a lot of employees attached to that line. And then there's a commercial side of it where we're kind of automated parking, if you will, where you just self-park, pay a kiosk or an app. And so what's fun about our industry is we have a lot of revenue that flows through parking. It's a pretty important asset, but it's sort of the secondary. It's a means to an end, right? So people aren't showing up just to park their car. They're parking on their way to doing something else. Yeah. Going to the office or an event or whatever. So it's just interesting sort of, like I said, this sort of underbelly service. And And I think in that there's a lot of opportunity. It's a pretty underserved industry, I would say. And also in that is a lot of complexity that people don't necessarily see from the surface. So I've really enjoyed my career in parking. I was parking cars as a college kid.
Man.
And that's how I found myself, still doing this 20 something years later.
I always thought those were the smartest guys in college that valeted cars on Friday and Saturday night because of the tips. Am I right or am I wrong?
I mean, still the best job I've ever had. I was parking, it happened to be in Malibu. I went to school at Pepperdine in Malibu, and there was this awesome...
Not too shabby of a place.
No, not too shabby. But valet parking was a good humbling. It was a way to bring me back down to earth. But I was parking cars at this amazing Hawaiian restaurant on the beach called Duke's Malibu.
For sure.
I know you know.
It's iconic.
I know you know it, right?
Yeah.
There's one in Huntington, and So probably the best job. I mean, you're sprinting in a parking lot on the beach, and you're parking cars for celebrities and interesting people, and you're making a lot of money in tips, and you're getting a great workout, and so I mean, it was honest. And I ended up managing that lot and hiring probably 12 of my good friends.
Yeah.
And so it was the best thing ever.
I can totally picture it in my head right there on PCH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, it was like a great gig. But I almost got fired after like 3 or 4 weeks.
How come?
Because I wasn't running fast enough. I was like too cool for like sprinting. I was like, this is a laid back job, guys. Like, why are you sprinting like 50 feet to a car? And I think it was like, for me, it just felt awkward. But the culture at that time of the guys who were running it, talking about good leaders, they were also Pepperdine guys. They're twin brothers. They were so hardcore. Like everything they did, they just went all in on.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we're going to run this lot like really hard, because if we can park 200 cars with 3 people, that just means we're sharing the tips with fewer people.
More tips for you guys, yeah.
And so there was like no slacking, and it would get hairy. I mean, you'd have like a line on PCH because we were just too thin or whatever, but they were just like, no, we're just going to grind through this. And so you had to literally sprint for every car. And it took me like 2 or 3 weeks to get over that, and almost got fired.
Yeah.
And I finally was like, I'm not going to get fired from a valet job. I'm going to figure this out. So it was a fun lesson in humility of like, if you're going to do something, you might as well go all in on it.
Yeah.
And so whether it's 4 hours or 8 hours that you're going to put towards something, it's like, you just might as well just crush it. You're not going to be any better off if you like half-ass it or duplicitous about your mindset about it. So honestly, that was a big deal for me, learning that lesson that early on.
What made you go all in on that job? Why?
I think I was afraid of failure. I think like having a conversation with my manager at that time, like I said, that this hardcore twins.
You still remember it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was humbling. I'm like, you don't think I'm like good enough to be on this team? And
you guys are just valeting cars.
It clearly, like to me, I'm like, if my first reaction was defensiveness and like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, how could I get fired from a valet job?
Yeah.
So, but once I got over that, like 48 hours of like thinking that was, that those guys were totally ridiculous or whatever.
Yeah.
48 hours after that, I'm like, no, like I'm not gonna go down that way. Like, so I ended up just literally just sprinting my ass off every shift.
Yeah.
Like overcompensating.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I did it. I think it was fear of failure. I think it was like, I think those guys actually, again, going back to great leadership, like they just held a really high standard and they didn't apologize for it.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me that was like, I want to, they were doing it themselves. They weren't asking something different of me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to show these guys I got what it takes.
Yeah.
And as silly as that is in a valet parking lot, that kind of applies to everything.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that like in the everyday circumstances are big life lessons. And what would your hey, so really interesting that job, and now you're CEO of a company in the parking space. And how would your 20-year-old self respond if you showed up and said, hey, 20-year-old Joel, you're going to be CEO of this company today that actually in some ways, this almost feels like the starting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Two things. I'd be surprised that it was parking probably, but I would be really thrilled. Because I think at 20 years old, like I didn't know, I had no clue what I wanted to do other than I knew I wanted to be entrepreneurial. I really respected my great-grandfather. In my family sort of lore, my great-grandfather was this sort of cowboy entrepreneur who did some really cool stuff, and like owning businesses and having some success with that created he was able to buy a beautiful piece of land and build a few cabins on it that he put into a trust that could never be sold. And now that's still enjoyed by my family, 50 years later. The legacy of just hard work and taking chances and kind of that sort of cowboy entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It was really inspiring. So as a kid, I kind of just was like, okay, look, I want to have freedom of time and I want to have freedom of money. Those were my biggest drivers, but I had zero focus. I had no idea how to there was no like major that spoke to me other than like just a general business major.
Sure.
And even that I watered it down with international business. Got an international management degree, which...
How is that watering it down?
Because it wasn't even a business degree. It was like international studies with an emphasis in management.
Okay.
I don't even know what it's interesting that they even offered it, but it was basically a way to avoid quantitative stats.
That sounds like a good strategy.
Yeah. So my long-term trajectory was clear that I knew I wanted to be, sort of in business for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't have any clear path of how to get there.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was parking cars to pay my way through college.
Yeah.
So if I would have known at that time that this is what I'd be doing, I think I'd be thrilled, and it probably would have taken a lot of anxiety out of the picture. But so no, I'm really grateful for what I'm doing and for how this has all worked out.
Yeah. I'd love to hear the origin story of how you came to found it.
Yeah. So parking cars to pay my way through school and college led to eventually, shortly after college, getting married. And my wife was in grad school for medicine. She's an orthopedics PA now. So she was going through that program, and I wasn't sure what I was doing. So stuck around with that same company, but then started kind of taking management positions and kind of growing the business a bit with them. And that was in Los Angeles. And so it was sort of like hey, I'm going to hold down the fort while my wife gets the graduate degree.
Yeah.
And I'll figure out my stuff a little bit later while she's doing her thing. It was always like a temporary thing, right? But as these things work, it was one thing led to the next. Now I'm managing a larger facility, learning commercial parking and then healthcare. And a couple years into it, I'm like, this is actually kind of an interesting industry. And to the credit of my employer, I had a really awesome boss and leader of that company, the founder of the company that was based in San Diego, but had business all throughout Southern California, was a phenomenal man. His name is Michael Harth. Still a good friend and mentor and competitor. But he was a big reason for me kind of sticking around parking.
Yeah.
And it was at a time, so he and his three best friends all started parking companies in different parts of the country out of college. He was
three best friends. They all started the same type of company, just chose different regions of the country.
Well, one was in Hartford, Connecticut, one was in Boston, and one was in San Diego, because that's where they all went to school. And then they started parking companies after school, and then eventually all came together and merged and became a big national parking company. And I was a part of that early days, right before the merge. And then the merge happened, and it was like gasoline on fire. They just started growing like crazy. And that's when I saw that like this business wasn't like some little cottage industry. It was actually kind of a big national industry, global industry. And there was tons of opportunity. So I just started kind of riding that growth and growing with them and taking on more and more leadership positions. And I was actually having fun. It was definitely scratching the entrepreneurial itch.
Yeah.
good leadership, fun, great culture, and a lot of growth. So there was, it was like all of a sudden, okay, maybe this is a career. Maybe I should stick around here for a while. And that, because of lack of other like passions, it was just sort of like, this is working, keep it up.
Yeah.
Eventually we wanted to get out of California, raise a family somewhere else. And so we were trying to figure that out. And I moved to, we had an opportunity to open a market in Denver. So that same company was expanding. They said, hey, we got an opportunity in Denver. I raised my hand, came out and opened the market. And so everything was going well, but I had this restlessness, and a few years into that, it was sort of like I'm in my late 20s. No, I'm in my early 30s at that point, and I'm just sort of like, okay, I kind of see where this is going to go. I'm either going to get comfortable, get paid too well to leave, kind of thing, or maybe I got to just take a leap of faith. And honestly, I didn't think I'd go and start a parking company. I just thought I needed to kind of like get enough headspace to figure out what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I didn't have a whole lot of time. My wife and I were pregnant with our second kid. So we had a little girl and we had another one coming, and we weren't independently wealthy. So I needed to make an income.
Yeah.
And so I ended up putting in my notice, and I had to figure some things out pretty quickly, and ended up joining a startup, but deferred my income for equity. So I had no income from that. So I was like, okay, I've solved the problem a little bit in that I want to go and do this startup.
Yeah.
But I still had the problem of making an income. So I started Parkwell. It was like the plan B to sort of stop the bleeding while the startup took off.
Yeah.
And so Parkwell, early days, it was honestly like the ambition was, let me just run a few parking lots that are sort of passive.
Yeah.
And that'll be a side hustle.
Yeah.
And I wish I had a better origin story, but like it was almost sort of like, the reality of why Parkwell was founded was to help me just like stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
And so
Really
I guess
practical.
you could say, necessity. So, but the fun thing about it was, the startup was interesting and it was cool, but this parking thing like almost immediately took off. So Parkwell was like three parking lots in those early days. A few of them did really well for me. And, before I knew it, my income had been totally replaced by a handful of these lots. It allowed me to hire my cousin who, was in Denver, and he and I were always close. And so hired him, made him a partner. We started like looking at, okay, maybe there's more to this parking thing. We can make a run at it.
Yeah.
And within a year, it was pretty clear. We just had so much opportunity that
Wow.
I left the startup, went all in on Parkwell. My cousin and I started building a little team, and a couple of years later, we kind of became like a real force at least in the Denver area.
Yeah.
And it just kind of never stopped. We just kept growing at 30-40% a year, until we started, growing geographically, and COVID was a hiccup, but for us, COVID impacted us really hard. But yeah, basically that story was just sort of almost an accidental success, I would say.
Yeah.
And in some ways, like, probably the part of the coolest part of my journey is just that, it sort of happened in spite of myself.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some great plan with, it was just sort of happened, and I just happened to be right along with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Part of me wants to believe that actually is the more common story. That it just is this, there's not necessarily a huge vision for what something might be. It oftentimes is just the smallest, simplest solution to something that feels like a real-time problem. And then it just kind of, incrementally goes from there. Similar, some family lore in our family. So similarly, a great-grandfather who was highly entrepreneurial. He lived in Los Angeles in the teens, and my last name is Smith, but no, he was a blacksmith.
Mm-hmm.
But he just had like a welding shop. And that was when the oil boom was taking place in LA. And so there were oil wells that had the drill bits that were getting worn down,
Mm-hmm.
and they would bring those to him for refurbishment because he was this welder. And he would refurbish them to better condition and better performing than the original than the original tool.
That's pretty cool.
And so that ended up being the foundation of his origin story to a company that he built. But I want to get back to you.
Well, I think that's a good example. Yeah, it's like, so you could say accidental, and maybe that's the wrong way to put it. I think it's seizing the moment, seizing the opportunities that come by. I think are what defines most entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
they're not necessarily creating the moment always.
Yeah,
but when that moment happens, or when the opportunity is there, they're able to kind of see how this is an important thing to capture.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of businesses, a lot of good things are built from that point on, right?
The Reframe Fix is a podcast from Workbench. When growth creates pressure, Workbench helps CEOs and leadership teams cut through complexity, align their people, and scale with confidence, bringing clarity through executive coaching and strategic planning. Learn more at workbench.co.
So here you are, 9 years in now.
Yeah.
70 people, 300 people, top line revenue, plus or minus 70 million. You talked about a good leader having warmth and competence.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, in your role as CEO, how do you demonstrate warmth and competence? Or if I were to ask someone on your team, wherever they sit in the organization, hey, how do you see Joel showing up with warmth and competence? What would they say?
Oh, man. I think the warmth shows in the way we've set up our business. Like, so there's kind of macro and micro, I would say. But from a macro level, the business is just set up with a bunch of values that are, very much on that side of the spectrum. So, we really, put a lot of effort and time into recognizing our people and caring for our employees. We do some pretty radical generosity within the business. So we have a Go-Giver Fund, which it's called the Go-Giver Fund because of a great little book called The Go-Giver that we kind of adopted early days. We adopted as kind of the language around like, hey, we're going to run a business based on, these basic principles of giving. And the easiest one to kind of get your mind around as it pertains to business is we're always going to give more in value than we receive in compensation. And there's a bunch. There, one is giving of yourself is the best gift you can. So it's like, your time, your attention, all those things. But we kind of baked that into the cake from day one. And so we have this very values-driven business, and generosity being kind of the preeminent value is so that there's a lot of warmth that comes in there, right? So like when people join the company, there's a swag bag and there's like we sit down and meet every single person. There's a lot of celebrating successes, a lot of recognition, every chance we get, every meeting we have, every big kind of like executive meeting we have, we start with good news and gratitudes. And so those are like the macro ways where the warmth is just sort of like sets the tone.
Yeah.
At the micro level, I mean, basic things for me are, I just say hello to everybody. I walk around the office every morning and just make sure everybody gets a greeting. It doesn't happen 100% of the time. I miss some people here and there. But generally, I take the time to sit with people and see how they're doing. I'm a good time. Like today we have a monthly happy hour at the office, and when that rolls around, I make sure I mix it up with everybody and I have a few drinks, and it's I'm accessible, I'm personable, I'm not sort of quick
locked away in your CEO office.
I don't do this sort of obligatory check in and say hi to people, shake their hands. I hang out. So I think that shows up. I think when we have problems, which is inevitable, and we're 300 employees, there's a lot of people problems. I get pretty engaged in those. So I make time for that.
How come? Not how come you make time, but how come you choose to get engaged?
Because I care about our people. And I think, if there's somebody struggling, or let's say it's a performance related issue, or could be like just a personnel conflict, right? Like somebody doesn't feel like something was handled fairly or whatever. These things matter to me, right? So trying to hear people out, trying to right a wrong if we're responsible for misstepping or failing to meet somebody's expectations. I want to apologize, or I want to hear them, or I want to defend the decision we made and explain why we did that.
Yeah.
So those are all important to me. I think at the end of the day, I just want people to feel like they're cared for. And this is the experiment we're trying to run. And, we're not the first by any means, but the experiment we're trying to run is that business can be a place where people are valued for being their whole self, right? So how they show up at work is important, but also what they care about outside of work and what their obligations are outside of work are just as important to us. And we want this sort of work part of the equation to be supportive of all of it. And how can you do that if you don't actually care about the whole picture, right? So usually, what I've learned is just when somebody's struggling, it usually has to do with things outside of work that kind of come in and affect things at work. And if you don't have the patience or the interest to like dig into that, then you're probably not able to kind of provide that more holistic type of solution. So that's what we're trying to do. And what we've found is it's messy.
Yeah.
It's hard, and it's also super rewarding, and creates a level of buy-in from our team, and that is, I think, unique because we, I think, are all more committed to this thing, and it's parking, by the way. We're more committed to it than is probably reasonable or normal. And I think that's a great thing, and it makes it more enjoyable, even if it costs us more time or stress along the way.
How do you talked about it being messy. How do you hold space? How do you hold tension around the messiness when you're also a business?
It's a $1 million question. I think we don't do that well all the time. In other words, sometimes we wade into too messy of waters that we shouldn't. Sometimes we sometimes we miss the boat altogether, and we're just not paying attention to that. But I would say in general, one thing is we have a really talented person on the team who comes from operations and has grown up in parking just like I did. But he just had a very unique skill and talent he just had like ultra high empathy, ultra high ability to connect with people. He was naturally the person everybody wanted to come and talk to or confide in.
Yeah.
And we said, your sweet spot is like coaching people, culture. And this is somebody who is a partner and an operator. But like we said, no, the role you're actually going to play is you're going to be in charge of our people and our culture. And really, and functionally how that looks is he's like not an HR manager. He's really more of like a team coach, almost like a team therapist.
Yeah.
And we've empowered him to do that. So like, how do we navigate the messiness? Well, in part, we empowered one person who's really good at that.
Yeah.
To actually make that his mandate. Like that's your job.
Yeah.
Is manage that messiness and be the sort of like, champion of this tension between caring for our employees and their lives, so that outside of work as well. And we're running a business and we have expectations and standards. And
the metaphor I sometimes like to use is that our lives are like a pool or a pond. I think the pandemic blew up any remaining notion that, hey, we had these really distinct silos in life, and that you could keep this work silo really distinct from all other parts of life, but that our lives are actually like a pond or a pool. And if you throw a pebble rock into that pool, it has a ripple effect across everything.
Totally.
And I'm thinking of an example that's relatively close to home of somebody that I knew that was going through a divorce. And that was fully impacting how they were showing up at work. But then after 6 months, the CEO of that company came to this person and said, hey, I'm still running a business here. You haven't really shown up for 6 months now. And by the way, fully understandable. Like, this is a huge event that's impacting this person's life. How do you navigate that? So, this person, do you have guidelines that help you? Do you?
Yeah, no guidelines. There's what I've learned is like there are important rules probably and guidelines or structure to help guide these things, but I'm allergic to all of those because in some ways it takes away the heart behind something. Like, the heart behind that is like we just want to be a caring organization. That also means we care about winning, right? It also means we care about excellence, but we care about a lot of things. We care about the people first and foremost.
A lot of people say that, by the way, or a lot of CEOs, our people are our most important asset.
For sure, yeah.
But the reality, in terms of if you look at, hey, what is treatment of people within the company? What does care of people in the company actually look like? Very, very rarely do the two line up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be crazy to not say that. And also, I think the problem is we have, centuries of running businesses where the norm is just so not that like you can get away with a lot. You can say you're caring, you can do a few things, you can bonus people well or whatever, and that's caring or whatever. But so we don't have a very good standard in probably at least in American businesses of what it really looks like. And I don't pretend that we have it all figured out, but I think like a couple of things that have helped us. So there are standards, there are things to sort of like institutionalize or automate the caring, and when you do leave it to like individual judgment or how you're feeling on any given day, I think that's probably not going to work out. I think that's way too sort of like personality based. So so this is an example where like so I'll tell you some of the things we've done. One thing early on, I knew that as the business would grow and make more and more money, and as me being the primary owner of the business, I knew kind of enough about human nature that I would get attached to those earnings. And so if I don't build in generosity now, it'll be harder to do it later. So early on, we just said, we're going to spit off 10% of our income and put it into the Go Giver Fund. And it's been a great thing. So now we don't have to think about
Top line revenue.
Income.
Okay.
Income. Okay. Yeah. So more like bottom line. But that 10% pool has just grown every year as we've grown our business. And it's a big number now. It's big enough to look at and be like, ouch, like, that could all go back into to the pockets of the leadership team or whatever. But it's not something we worry about. It's not something we ever question because it's just baked into the business.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible part of how we do our business and the people that are impacted by that. So half of those funds go to, really good, trusted nonprofits that are doing work in our community that we develop relationships with, we volunteer with. So about half of those funds go out into our community, and then half of it stays in the business in what we call a hardship fund. It's kind of a combined hardship or opportunity. So for those who are like looking for an opportunity, whether it's growing their education or, investing in their skills somehow, then that would be money to help them with that. But most of that money actually gets spent on hardship. And that's an employee who's dealing with a transportation problem, a living situation challenge. You'd be surprised. It's all over a lot of healthcare stuff. But these are employees, in our world, many of our employees, the majority of our employees are hourly, kind of, right above minimum wage. So there's just not a lot of margin. And so if you have an alternator go out, that can be a real problem. and all of a sudden it affects your ability to get to work.
Right.
If you have a living situation or an unexpected health crisis, these are really these can be problems that set people back, and can really actually have a long-term negative impact on somebody's life. So that hardship fund is there, and it's something we promote. We're always looking for opportunities to spend it, and we've created a culture where people are actually looking for what other people might need and applying on their behalf even.
Yeah.
So that's just become like this really critical part of our business, and it's automated, right? I don't have to think about it. I don't have to make a decision on it every year. And I think that kind of thing is really critical if we're talking about guidelines or structure. But if we're talking about like sort of the things you do, like that I like not putting structure around or rules, it's around things like, discipline. How do we handle when somebody's struggling with something, right? Performance related. Of course, there's got to be some boundaries around that, but like in general, I think that like I like having the judgment, the ability to have the leadership team kind of come together and say, "This is what we think is the right thing to do here."
Yeah.
And as soon as you start building rules and guidelines, it starts boxing you in.
Yeah.
And at a certain stage, that becomes more necessary because you got to be a little more protective of the business. But we're at an early enough stage where, and we have a good team of people that are trusted that, we kind of make some of those decisions on the fly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not the structure guy. That's that's definitely part of my personality is like, I'm allergic to that, but, but also we're in that flux now where we're starting to realize, okay, we need to have some structure in place so this isn't like shooting by the hip.
Yeah. What's the biggest leadership challenge you've ever faced? Or one of the most challenging leadership situations?
Oh man. I'm stuck on one that I don't think I want to go there.
Yeah. Don't go there then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think let me think about that one. Well, I think probably one of the most difficult time in our history was COVID. When you run a parking business where all of your customers are either coming into an office or going to a restaurant or going to an event, and and you have the shutdown that we had, our parking revenues, declined by 90%, essentially overnight.
Wow.
And so, in most of our cases, that left us holding the bag for a lot of expenses that hadn't occurred yet, or that were like obligated but not paid yet, and the revenue wasn't there to cover those. So, we had probably a good like 4-month full-on war room crisis mode where number one, we were trying to get paid for all of our outstanding AR. And so we were trying to work with our clients to get us paid. We were, trimming down the team, putting people on furlough, as little as we possibly could to get through it. And fortunately, we didn't have to put everybody on furlough. It was actually pretty minimal in the end. And then it was just like bootstrapping, like how can we get creative here? How can we bring value? How can we still show up? Because eventually this will all end and we would love to still, service all of these customers and clients. So it was really the question was, how do we just hold on? Right. And so that was one of the times where you kind of buckled down and we said, if our job is to manage physical parking facilities, what we can't do is work from home. We can't be the people who call it in. So one of the decisions we made early on is we're going to show up and we're going to be in the field every day. And we're actually, and a lot of our clients actually weren't. A lot of our clients were the people who owned the facilities or managed the office buildings or whatever.
Yeah.
And, they were working from home and occasionally would send like an engineer through a project or whatever, but we were there every day. And so one of the things we did was we just showed up and we actually added a lot of value to these properties. and took on roles that were even bigger than ours to take on. And we paid all of our bills. We didn't withhold any funds from any of our clients, or we didn't, withhold any of our obligations to our employees. The partners and I all took a haircut, but I still paid everybody, and we just got through it. So 3 or 4 months into that period, started some of the PPP loans started coming through, and we said, okay, we are going to live to fight another day.
Yeah.
And then we kind of decided early on in that process, by the way, in the background of all this, I was just like reeling every night, trying to figure out. We went from we were soaring like right up until COVID hit. We were just ripping. We were growing
Booster
like
rockets.
Yeah, we were growing like crazy. We were winning everything. Everything was sort of happening in a good way, and it was almost kind of like, I was just sort of like, this is amazing. This is so great.
Right. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? And when that happened, it took me a few months of just sort of like disbelief. I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. It was like this, it was this big battle. Yeah. It was kind of a conversation with God about like, this was a really good thing. Like how is it okay that this just falls apart and it ceases to exist?
Yeah.
And of course, during that time, I was starting to get in touch with like, I think I've become entitled. I've begun to believe that this is like supposed to happen, and it's just, this is all like due to me or something like that. And so it was a really good lesson for me personally of like understanding ownership versus stewardship. And at that stage in my life, it was kind of like coming to grips with like, do I want to own something and hold on to it tightly, or do I want to like steward something and have more of an open palm? And ever since then, I've been trying to steward and think of it as such. And it's been a pretty profound shift in the way I think about the business. But yeah, getting through that, it was wonderful to sort of survive it, and then coming out of it just within a few months of sort of like, okay, we're going to make it. The leadership team and I kind of got together and we're like, actually, I think we have an opportunity right now to double down and make some big bets to come out winning, not just surviving, but like winning big here. And so we did that. We took some big swings and hired some really good talent that was available, because that was a time when a lot of people were on the job market.
Yeah.
And we made some big hires, and that made a huge difference for us. We were able to grow really quickly coming out of that. And it was almost kind of like by 2020, by summer of 2021, we were kind of like, okay, we're back on that same trajectory.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple, or what I would call learnings from that one. How do you let go of control, not hold on so tightly, let go, that open-handed language that you used, and then take risks. But as you look back on that season, what did you learn about yourself that was most impactful?
That was the beginning of learning how attached I am to the business as a part of my identity.
What were you getting from it?
It just rocked me in a way that would only rock you if it's very much attached to your identity, right? Like if it's just the business having, trouble during a black swan event, and you're realizing, okay, well, it's either I have the money in the bank to pay or not.
Yeah.
Or, it's just, that's a different emotional response. But no, this was more about like who I had become. And it was kind of going deep into my childhood of like,
it always does.
I want to, this is a part of my aspirations. I'm sort of, it felt like what had to happen is I was starting to step into myself and had been validated. Like, this is exactly what you need to be doing with your life. And then it kind of felt like ripped apart. And then I didn't know what that was. It was like, I wasn't willing to accept that. And then I realized, okay, this is because of this is who I see myself as. It's, Joel the entrepreneur or whatever.
Look what I've built.
And I was unwilling to sort of like accept that it was fragile. And so it was the beginning of a process of learning that, that like as much of a blessing the business has been, and as much as I love it, it's actually just a small part of who I am. And it kind of needs to be put in the right place. In that, I need to stand on firmer ground, essentially.
Other side of the coin, what do you look back on as one of your biggest leadership successes? And it doesn't have to be at Parkwell.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think every time I've trusted other key people on my team, and because I'm a man of faith, every time I've made decisions with a high degree of trust in God, I think I've made my best business decisions or leadership decisions.
There's that letting go of control.
A lot of it has to do with letting go of control. A lot of it has to do with just shutting my own voice down and listening to the others around me, my partners, the people I've hired to lead and manage. And then also just like getting quiet by myself. I kind of have a routine of going to the gym, but I really go to the gym just so I can justify a half an hour in the steam room afterwards. And that steam room time is
not the cold plunge.
Sometimes if I'm in the steam room long enough, I can jump in. The steam room is like a sacred place for me because it's mostly just thinking and like deep thinking, meditative type thinking and praying. And it's almost always where I come back to stewardship. And the rest of my existence almost feels like a fight against ownership. It's like the control piece. Or
what's the difference to you? Or what's that nuance, and why is it important?
The nuance, what it feels like, is I'm responsible for this thing. That feels like ownership. And so then I'm making decisions out of my own knowledge and wisdom and energy levels, right? Like, what can I give this thing? And that feels like ownership. Control, fear, those are kind of levers. I'm in that mindset. Stewardship feels like I have the gift of leading this thing. This is a blessing. And how do I get to use all of my gifts and talents and knowledge to steer this thing? And then how do I leverage the gifts and talents of others around me? And then how do I listen to what might be happening on a macro level that might inform the next step? And that to me feels like tapping into like the spiritual world, right? And kind of listening for and often it doesn't show up in the form of turn right or turn left. It almost always just shows up in the form of like a state of mind or a peacefulness, a peacefulness around doing something. Oftentimes I come out of the steam room with okay, still don't know what I'm going to do, but I have zero anxiety about that. And I trust myself. So sort of like coming out of it with a sense of trust because I'm approaching it through the lens of like stewardship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where I feel anxiety, I didn't reach that stewardship level.
Yeah. So is the steam room, I'm kind of laughing at your language of the steam room as a sacred place.
Yeah. Well, there's something about like naked men too, I guess.
In terms of, what you're describing falls into like mindfulness. How do you create space to hear what you may not be hearing? But what's the frequency with which, hey, you need to get into the steam room, so to speak, because like, hey, I need things that need to clear. I need to get back to this place of peace.
Yeah. It's almost more of a proverbial thing, but like the actual like routine of it for me is like, if I'm there a few days a week,
it's sufficient.
That's sufficient. If I'm not, if I skip a week or two, it kind of starts showing up.
Yeah.
But for me, if I'm there 2 or 3 days a week, and the workout's great too. And that helps me too.
Yeah.
It helps clear my mind and all that.
For sure.
And so yeah, I mean, I think that's like the rhythm and the cadence, and it's similar to like journaling for me. If I'm journaling a few days a week, it's a way to recalibrate.
Yeah.
So these are all kind of like routines that help me stay grounded and kind of in that stewardship mindset. And I don't know if this is common, but I just find that I'm constantly, if I'm not at least giving it that much frequency, it's so easy for me to start veering into that, control.
Yeah.
Relying on my own, time and energy, and
sure.
And so I'm just in that battle. I hope one day I can kind of escape this sort of like cycle, but I don't know. I don't know how that works. All I do know is that like, when I've made decisions or when I've led the team out of that place, that sort of peace that comes with knowing that this isn't all on me, and that I just have the gift of being able to steer this thing. I've gotten the best response, the best sort of buy-in from my team. I've gotten the most, positive outcomes when we're pitching a deal. It just sort of shows up in the business in lots of ways.
Yeah. Man, sounds like freedom.
Yeah.
In a way.
I wish it was just sort of always the case, but it's this constant battle.
Yeah. They're coming back to.
Yeah.
Joel Christensen, thanks for being on the podcast today. If people want to find you, if they have a need for parking, if they manage a building, if they own a building, whatever the case may be, but what's the best way for people to find you?
Well, our website's probably the best place, www.goparkwell.com.
Yeah.
And we're pretty easy to find out there.
Great.
Yeah, it's been great talking, Jake. Thanks for asking good questions.
Hey, thanks for being here today. Appreciate you.
All right, man.
Yeah.